So I'm going to call to order the meeting of the Board of Appeals, the 7 o'clock meeting on September 19th. This is upon the application of Ashen?
Adjourn.
Ashen
Yes.
Clark and Marcia Gillings through their attorney, Mary McGettrick, at 70 to 72 Brush Hill Road, Milton, dated August 19, 2024, seeking a variance for use, a variance for setback relief, and a special permit to construct a two-story addition to an existing garage. The current partially built addition was constructed without permits and has been ordered to be demolished by the Norfolk Superior Court within 120 days of the court decision dated July 25, 2024, unless relief is granted through the Milton Zoning Board of Appeal processes and all other required permits are obtained. The court has also required that the existing work done to date be required to comply with all applicable regulations as an additional precondition. The property is located in a Residence C zoning district. The applicants seek the following relief: a special permit or variance to accommodate the fact, or variances to accommodate the fact that the garage was a pre-existing non-conforming structure upon which a second story was added at a distance of 1.26 feet from the left side lot line when 10 feet are required by Article 10 side yards of the Milton zoning bylaw. A variance to accommodate the fact that the rear left corner of the structure has been constructed at 29 feet from the rear lot line when 30 feet are required by the bylaw. A use variance under Article 3 in order to use the garage for both parking and a living unit. A variance to accommodate the fact that the front left corner of the second story is 8.21 feet and the rear left corner of the second story is 8.42 feet when 10 feet are required. A variance so as to accommodate a low knee wall at the front of the second floor deck that extends an additional distance from the wall of the premises. The details of the application are detailed in the filing that Mrs. McGettrick has made on behalf of the applicants, all of which is on the file of the board and open to public inspection. My name is Jeffrey Mullen. I'll be acting as chairman of this board hearing. With me are Kathleen O'Donnell and Nicholas Gray, members of the board. I want to welcome everybody to the Board of Appeals. I see the applicant is here. Mrs. McGettrick representing the applicants. I also see that Mr. Atchu, the building commissioner of the town of Milton, is here, as is town council. I want to thank them. They're here at my request. The board has requested that they appear and invite them to supplement the record. We'll accept testimony from them and are happy to receive any comments that either of the officials of the town representing the town wish to provide to the board. So thank you very much for doing that. Before I ask Mrs. McGettrick to make the application on behalf of the applicants, I want to read what's in the record so that we know what we have in front of us. And the way I'm going to proceed with this hearing is I'll ask Mrs. McGettrick to discuss the application as we normally would. I'd then like to ask the town to testify, offer comments, say hello, whatever they would like. We'll then have questions and answers. We'll close the evidentiary portion of the hearing and we'll debate the merits of the application in accordance with the open meeting law. Any questions by any of the participants in terms of what I've just said, why we're here, and the order of the proceedings? Okay, hearing none. All right. So we have just following our usual process. We have a letter. We have an application dated August 19, 2024, executed by Mrs. McGettrick on behalf of the applicants. That is responding to a letter from the building commissioner, Mr. Atchu, who, as I indicated, is with us today, in which he denies the submittal of certain permits that were submitted to his office for the reasons stated in both the court order, the settlement agreement, if you will, that was executed by the parties, and as I reiterated at the top of the hearing, it's the letter is consistent. We'll take notice of that. Got a multiple page letter from Mrs. McGettrick submitted. Let's see, it's 9 pages, submitted by Mrs. McKettrick, dated August 19, 2024, for which we thank her. Attached to that, this is Superior Court order dated July 25, certified plot plan of the premises, conceptual architectural plans, the Unit 70 deed, the condominium layout plan, the recorded 1902 plan, a GIS plan, the assessor's record of the premises, or at least one of the premises, this being a condominium. A copy of the 1964 special permit was issued by this board with respect to unrelated matters that are in front of us, but had to do with two kitchens and a slight addition to the property. Some photos, as well as letters of support from entities that are involved in the condominium. That specifically, we've got a letter from Barbara Surratt, who indicates that, let's see, she's currently a trustee of the condominium created in 2022, and she indicates that she supports the application and that the applicants are entitled to and encouraged to and may provide a letter to the Board of Appeals as a letter to support the granting of the zoning relief. There's also a second letter from April Surratt and Antonio Carrera to the same effect, indicating that they're in support of the relief sought. It's my understanding that both letters are written by members, people who are involved in the condominium. Is that right, Mrs. McKettrick?
Okay. Yes.
That is, recently, Mrs. McKettrick, along with a revised letter, slightly revised letter, submitted to the board a more legible copy of the site plan that came with the application, for which we thank her. Believe that is the full extent of the contents of the materials that are in front of the board, and on which the board will rely in deciding this matter. Mrs. McKettrick, welcome back to the Board of Appeals. We look forward to hearing your testimony. How can the board be of assistance?
Thank you very much. Yes, I represent the applicant. I did want to point out, I believe there's a letter from each of the neighbors on each side of this property, letter of support. You did not mention it, but it should be in the record.
Bill, correct me. I don't have that in my package, but it could be there. Why don't you
produce it?
with
I'll produce it if you don't find it. I know we have it.
Okay.
I don't want to, leaf through all these pages now and try to find it, but we do have a letter of support from each of the neighbors on each up to the right and the left of the property.
Okay, on Brush Hill Road.
Yes, on Brush Hill Road.
Okay.
Okay, so you've read the notice, which is pretty detailed and does describe the forms of relief that we've requested in this application. Just to summarize, there are two main elements to this application. After everything that's happened over the past year, all of which was described in the notice and it's described in the court order, what we're trying to do here is to sort of recover something useful out of all of that. I think it's important to point out at the beginning of this hearing that we're already halfway through the 120-day period. And it's more likely, and that the order from the court, the agreement, does allow the defendant to sell the property, but that means that the burdens of compliance fall upon any new owner. And again, the same 120-day time limit applies. It doesn't start on sale. So first off, I want to acknowledge and say that we recognize that there's very limited time to do anything but demolish the structure and start over. Now, it may be possible to get permits to correct the deficiencies. It would have to happen very quickly. It would have to happen with very capable licensed contractors and structural engineers, and there'd have to be a will and a way found to do that with the building department. I honestly can't say whether that's possible. So one reason for this application, though, is that we would like to know if the Board of Appeals would grant a use variance to allow a third residential unit on this property. Although this structure may not be able to stay up, you have a plan and you have a certified survey that does show a location of the structure, and that's based on an on-the-ground return to the site at the beginning of August, where everything was measured again. So those setbacks that we're requesting relief for are accurate and are certified by a surveyor. Even if the building comes down, if the board wants to grant a use variance, feels it's justifiable, that it's a good, reasonable request for a third unit, it could be tied to the plans that have been submitted, which are conceptual architectural plans, and to the certified plot plan, so that you know what you're allowing. In contrast to some of the new legislation that's going to become available in a few months that would allow accessory units, but hasn't yet been fully defined in terms of any limits or restrictions. In Milton, we're asking for a variance, and you have a lot of details about what's being proposed here. But I do want everybody to understand, we all acknowledge that the time is short here. And from the 24th of, of July, just to get, denial, just to get the surveyor out there, get that plan back, get the denial letter back from the building department, which was done faster than it normally would be, and then to apply to the Board of Appeals, brings us almost to the end of September. So anyway, I'd like to just get into, some comments about what this application is about, a little more detail. I'd like to begin with the description of the property. This is a 9,712 square foot lot. It's located on Brush Hill Road in a Residence C district, and it is approximately a half mile from Mattapan Square, which means that it's very close to a very number of forms of mass transit. There's a train line, there are many bus lines, and there's the end of the trolley line. We've heard plenty about that in the last year. Brush Hill Road, which becomes Truman Highway in the direction of Hyde Park, is a divided road. On the other side from this location, there's open grassland and woods, and the Neponset River. There's a bike path and a bike trail. There's a walking path and bike trail along the roadway, which connects Neponset bike paths to Foul Meadow and the Blue Hills. So it's an interesting location. It's very accessible to mass transit, and you're very close to the city, but there are recreational opportunities nearby. The lot has a pre-existing non-conforming frontage of 69 feet. It was created, the lot plan was recorded in 1902. The house was constructed in 1890. So this is a very old house. It was constructed as a two-family home, and it really hasn't been changed very much architecturally since the beginning. The house is constructed only 2 feet from the front lot line, which means that it's very close to the front of the lot, and the remaining area of the 9,712 square feet is to the rear. So there's quite a lot of rear yard on this lot. There's a one-story enclosed porch in the front of the existing structure. There's a rear one-story addition, as you heard, that was approved by the Board of Appeals a number of years ago. It's a 2-story structure with a peaked roof. There's a driveway on each side of the residential structure. And on the left at the rear of the driveway, there is the current partially renovated garage, which was originally a 900 square foot cement block garage with a sort of a low peaked roof. It was built about 1920. It's somewhat unusual. I think that it's all very old, but the garage was connected to Unit 70, which is a condominium owned by the applicant by electrical lines, a sewer line, and a water line. So we've sort of concluded from that there must have been some kind of business activity in that garage, maybe a workshop, maybe something more. And it has never been improved. Was not in a particularly attractive looking structure. A couple of old windows on each side, and then just cement blocks. So that's what the property looks like. It does consist of recorded lots, and the lots were recorded after the house was built. So maybe back in 1902, the thought was you could have a driveway and you could develop a rear lot here. Since then, of course, our bylaws, we've adopted a zoning bylaw in 1938, and we've adopted more recent amendments to our bylaws about driveway lots and that kind of thing. So it isn't, in my view, these are not two this is not a buildable lot to the rear, but it is a little bit unusual the way the property is laid out, and is one of the reasons I think that the current owner thought that there might be a possibility of another unit being built here. In this neighborhood, on this side of Brush Hill Road, there are single, 2, and 3 family homes. The lots vary in size. Many of them are smaller than the required 7,500 square feet. And almost all the homes in this area are older. They were constructed prior to adoption of the zoning bylaw in 1938. There's a 5-family mixed-use structure at the intersection of Blue Hills Parkway, Brook Road, and Brush Hill Road, not too far from here. In April 2022, the owners changed the unit ownership to condominium ownership and recorded all of the required documents, plans and documents, master deed, and so forth. And then not too long afterwards, in September 2022, the applicants purchased the property. Adjourn Clark is the one who's been doing all this construction work and had hoped to create a residential unit to the rear. He owns the property, Unit 70, with his mother, Marcia Gillis. And at the present time, Adjourn Clark, his partner, and their child, who's a year old now, they all live in Brockton in an apartment with his mother. He is here, by the way. I don't know if you could see him on the screen, but he is calling in on his phone. So if we want to have him participate, you'll need to make him a panelist, but we're not at that point yet, I don't think, but you'll be able to ask him questions if you want to. After the date of purchase, Mr. Clark and his partner learned they were going to become parents. That's when he started working on the idea of possibly creating a residential unit out of the garage. He started that way. There were repeated attempts to do construction. There were stop work orders. He submitted quite a few different versions of plans. In May, Joseph Prondak, our previous building commissioner, went to a new job in Needham. When Joseph H., who became the new building commissioner, there was a transition there. And the situation just got worse, basically. Suffice it to say, you all know now this has become a court case, and there's an agreement, and there's an 120-day time limit. I can't go into all the details, and I'm not sure it's going to help. I think what I really want to talk about today is whether it's reasonable and a good idea for the board to grant a variance to allow a 3rd residential unit at this property. Even if this same structure that's there now has to be taken down, a new structure could be constructed. Some of the issues that the building commissioners identified relate to the foundation. That's hard to repair them when there's a structure built on top. The garage was old. There's all kinds of, there could be many other issues, and there hasn't been a step-by-step inspection of the finished work. There are walls upstairs, so the walls are going to have to be removed in order to inspect. It could prove to be very difficult, very complicated, and may not be the most practical way to proceed.
Mrs. McKettrick, let me just,
Yes.
I'm going to interrupt you during your presentation, but let me ask you if you would, we heard your request, and you really want, do you want a sense of the board on the ask before we get into the details? Would you prefer that we conduct this hearing where we would pause there? I could ask the town for some testimony. The board could have a question and answer, and then you could proceed with your presentation. Would you like to do it that way rather than get into further details about the 8.9 feet versus the 10 feet?
Yes.
Or would you just like to complete your application? I'm sensitive to the specific request, and I think the board, I'm certainly prepared to speak to that and speak for the members, but it's at your pleasure. You're the
It would be
applicant.
very helpful I know it's unusual, but in this case, I
Oh,
think.
hearing is unusual.
Yes, I know it is. The situation is.
First time for me. It's been a long time I've been on this board, so it's the first time, so.
Yeah. So, it would help me in the sense that I've tried to stand back from what's happened and say, well, what could happen that would be a positive result? And I'd like to have some input on that from everybody. So yes, if you'd like to proceed that way, I can stop now and you can take comments and questions.
I don't mean to cut you off or stifle your
Well, I
presentation.
have more that I can say, and I'd be happy to do that. But I think maybe it would help to have some of that discussion.
Okay, well, members of the board, is that consistent with, you have any objection to that? Let me ask.
Not at all. I think that makes a lot of sense. Because, you know, we have the basic illegality of the construction itself. So we really sort of need to have that addressed before we do everything else.
Yeah, Mr. Gray is acceptable.
I agree with the other board, with you guys as well. That's fine.
Let me ask the town if at this point, Mr. Mello or the building commissioner, Mr. Atchu would like to be heard on this or any other matter at your pleasure. Mr. Mello.
Sure. Thank you, Chair Mullen, Acting Chair Mullen. I don't have anything to add in terms of testimony. I'm happy to answer questions or, you know, provide any advice the board is looking for. I'll defer to Joe for, you know, his testimony on the background of the matter. From my perspective, the board should review this request in the same fashion it would any other request for the same relief from any other applicant. So
Yeah.
happy to answer any questions but I'll defer to Joe for any factual, you know, background.
Commissioner.
Good evening, thank you. So yeah, I mean, this is quite the project. It goes back, I'll give you some of the background up to the point where I took over and how it's been going since, and what has led us to this point. Roughly February of 2023, Mr. Clark had decided to remove a very large portion of the existing garage there and started constructing a new building. At that point in time, Commissioner Prondak put a stop work order on it. We have several back and forths that went through the chat process with the permitting process, stop work orders and so forth, trying to direct Mr. Clark in the fact that he needed to seek relief from the board to continue in the process that he was looking to go. Over the number of months there leading past and going on and on, we led into myself coming into the town and the project continuing to move forward, being also giving him a number of stop work orders for the project as he continued to morph different components in this building going on to a second floor and whatnot, and expanding upon the project. Over the series of permits requests asking him to apply for with stop work orders in conjunction, he would give me various different types of permit plans, not actually coming up to what he really wanted to do. I kept telling Mr. Clark, you know, come forward with what you actually want to do, and then I can give you direction. I give you your cease and desist, and I'll give you your stop work orders, and you keep coming to me with more and more different projects of how you want to proceed. Finally, when we came down to it last August, so August of 2023, myself and two other inspectors went out there at Mr. Clark's request to look at the work he had done. And in fact, we found that the foundation was inadequate. A number of supports were not in place, and a lot of construction issues arose to the point where we deemed the structure unsafe and dangerous. We issued a stop work order and a cease and desist immediately on the project, saying not only do you not meet zoning requirements and setbacks and whatnot in use, but also you've structurally made this ineffective. It's no good. It's not a safe structure. He didn't heed warning. He continued to do as he pleased, went through the winter months. And finally, we came about going to court back in May and achieved the fact that we got a preliminary injunction, which turned into an injunction. The only permit, even if he is granted everything here tonight, the only permit that I will issue him is a demolition permit to take the structure down and raise it to the ground. If he's granted his relief here tonight, that allows him or another person the opportunity to rebuild in that location with what is approved by the board. However, the structure that is there, including the foundation that it is built upon, needs to be completely removed from that property. It is unsafe and dangerous, and I wouldn't reside in that building. He has been residing in that building until just recently. And as I went by just the other day, more construction work has taken place on the deck that is on the side of
You
the
cut off a
structure.
little bit, Commissioner, at the end. You said,
Sure. Work
something to the
continues there.
effect of, you went by there and then we didn't hear anything.
Yes, I'm sorry. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me
Yes.
now?
I
Okay.
can.
Can hear you
So
now. Yes.
I went by there the other
Yeah.
day, and work has continued to go on that building, even though he has orders not to. There's a deck that he has that's on the side of the building. So the garage that was there, he's using one of the walls that used to have an entry door and two windows as the main support in the middle, which is unstable for that building. Then the building, the wall that was a half wall to the far left-hand side, looking at it from the street, he built a deck on top of that, and has continued to build on that, even though he's been told to stop work. Yet again, this time ordered by a court, he continues to work. So I don't know how to proceed with him. Like I said, if he's granted everything tonight from the board, fantastic. However, the only building permit that I will give is a demolition permit for the building that is currently there to be completely demolished. And then with the granting approval from the board, he could rebuild in place, or somebody could rebuild in place a proper structure.
Thank you,
But
Commissioner.
this has been going on since February of 2023.
Right. Thank you very much. Let me ask, I mean, now I committed to the applicant that we would have a bit of a conversation before we took further testimony and before she completed her application. Is that fair? So now let me, if Marion, do you agree with that?
Yes,
Right,
that's
right.
fine.
What I'm sensitive to and what I don't want to do is stifle your presentation. I want to make sure that we're giving you a fair opportunity to present your case. But I also want to deal with the principal matter, particularly in light of what we just heard from the commissioner. So I'd like to spend a little bit of time before we close the evidentiary portion of this hearing, discussing in open session, everybody present amongst the members, the sense of the board with respect to the principal issue that's been requested, okay? Now, we learned from Mr. Leonard that occasionally the chair takes his prerogative and goes first, and I'm gonna exercise my prerogative, having learned at the foot of the acknowledged master of boards of appeal in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. So I think these are completely unprecedented facts, bordering on the extreme. I looked at my files today. I've been on this board for more than 25 years. Can't quite believe that, but it's true. And I've never seen a case like this. I actually called Jim Leonard and asked him too, since we don't sit on every board. So I think it's important to understand that this is not something that happens often, and that therefore it presents a little bit of a new issue for the board. Thirdly, I think the commissioner's testimony is very significant. I appreciate hearing it because we obtained from him a key fact, and that is, regardless of what the board does, the building is coming down. And this isn't a matter where the board's relief would save the structure and eliminate waste, and there's a hardship created by that. The hardship, the situation exists due to no fault of anyone from the town or the board. And we know that the building needs to come down. So now it becomes a matter, as Mrs. McKettrick, I think, has properly framed it, as to whether if there was a vacant situation there, would the board, on a new application or on this application, seek to or choose to permit a third dwelling unit on the lot? Is that fair? I mean, that's really what it comes down to. And if it did that, you'd have to accompany it with, the types of variances that the board has sometimes routinely granted, depending upon the situation. In other words, the setback issues with respect to the previously the structure that is now there are not out of the ordinary. But I do think the use is significant. And I am extremely concerned that if the board were to do that, we would set a very bad precedent that would permit two families all over the town and three families. I mean, I think this is a matter for town meeting. Should they choose to do something like this or to take advantage of the Commonwealth's new law? I don't know, but it doesn't seem to me appropriate to grant a use variance for a third, to make a two-family a three-family. And I think doing so would create a pretty dangerous precedent in the town, or certainly a precedent. Whether it's dangerous or not, it doesn't matter, but certainly a precedent. And I think whenever we do that, we really have to be careful with the facts, and I feel like acting otherwise would be precipitous. But I mean, those are my preliminary views. I'll be persuaded otherwise by my fellow members, and I invite them to offer their thoughts, and the applicant and the town are more than welcome to respond to that. Let me ask Mrs. O'Donnell if Ms. O'Donnell, if she would like to be heard.
Well, thank you very much, Chair. And I'm very troubled by this whole thing, and certainly hearing the information from the building commissioner was very useful. But I did read the condominium documents. I read the deed. I looked at the plans.
We knew you would. Did you go to the registry?
No, I go online.
No, I just thought maybe you'd take a trip down to Dedham.
Yeah, it's very lonely there. There's nobody there anymore. It's a deserted building. But I did notice that the condominium documents say that a unit owner can't undertake any kind of construction without getting the permission of the trustees and without getting a building permit. So the idea that a unit owner has decided to sort of take apart a garage without a building permit, without permission, without violating the condominium documents and all that sort of thing is very troubling to me. And I also noting the size of the lot. I used to live on Brush Hill Road. I know this building. I'm very familiar with the size of other lots on Brush Hill Road. This is a pretty big one. And as Ms. McGettrick pointed out, it has a huge yard. So my thought on it is that if they wanted to build a third unit and got the assent of the condominium association to do that, that they could come back before the board with a better design that isn't right next to the lot lines, that is in some different location in the backyard, that wouldn't be the situation where you're violating all these setbacks and wouldn't be using a spot that isn't very friendly to the neighbors. So my thought on it is to sort of say, well, I'm sort of not persuaded to give the permission at all to have the thing come down. And then somebody could come back in with a better plan and a better location in compliance with the new MBTA zoning. If that comes in, it won't qualify as an accessory dwelling unit because it won't be accessory. It'll be a separate unit, a separate ownership. So it would just be the addition of a third unit onto a two-family structure. And requesting a variance for that reason. Although, as I said, depending on whatever happens on October 7th and the decision, there may be some relief that comes under the MBTA zoning act. But I don't think the accessory dwelling unit law is going to help in this situation.
Fair enough. Mr. Gray, thank you. Thank you, Ms. O'Donnell. Mr. Gray.
Well, you guys took most of my points, so I concur
You
with.
go first next time. You go first.
No,
next time.
I'm always happy to follow in the wake of my erudite fellow board members. No, I in addition to all the stuff that you guys were discussing, I just feel it's not right for us to grant right, RIPE, not right, to grant sort of a set of variances or a special use permit without more definite plans. Right. I didn't really like the idea of granting something that might be, then it's sold and somebody else comes in and they have permission to. Usually we have much more detailed plans that we tie for a project of this scope that we tie into. So, yeah, I think that's all I had to add to what you guys have already said.
Thank you. Let me make one other comment. And, Marion, you've been in front of the board many times. You know that the board has oftentimes had a bias for trying to create units and to build the housing stock of the town. We've seen that time and again with the in-law bylaw. I don't want you to read in anything that the board has said that as to what the board might or might not do if there was something to come, since the issue of a three-family is a very big deal for the board. a three family unit on one property, or three living units on one property. So that in itself is a matter that needs to be carefully deliberated. So I just wanted to put a marker that with respect to there should be no reliance on that. We're really only talking about the application that's in front of us, and the sense of the board is that we're not inclined to give a use variance for that. I mean, and there's the further sense of the board is that the request asked is pretty extraordinary, and raises a whole host of issues that need to be carefully evaluated and deliberated. So with that, let me return it back to you and ask you how you'd like to proceed.
Well, I'd still like to discuss the application a little bit more. I understand what you're saying, and I understand why. I would say this, that one of the thoughts the reason I framed the application as, you know, a request for a use variance based on the conceptual architectural plans that have been filed. And there are conceptual architectural plans that you have in your file, and the certified plot plan, was that would give you a location, a construction style, and it would tell you what you were approving for that third unit. Alternatively, I could, and I understand you're not very inclined to do that at this time, I could say, would you grant a use variance for a third unit that would have to comply with all the setback requirements and everything, you know, which this one does not, this location does not. And I understand you're saying, well, you know, would like, you know, somebody to come back at a later time with the building down and come back with another application, and we might consider it. I understand you're saying that you don't look too favorably on 3-unit proposals for 3 units on one lot. We don't have any zoning that allows that. There is a 3-unit building two doors away from this one. There's a 5-unit building down on the corner. Despite the fact that we don't allow it in our zoning, there are instances in Milton where there are 3 units in one building in most of these cases. It's not the same as this one where you're asking for a separate unit. So yes, it's unique, it's different. I do want to say to you that the other condominium owner has supported from the beginning the idea of doing this. She would prefer to see, you know, I don't want to speak at length for her, but there's a tenant in the other condo unit. It was purchased as an investment by Ashon and his mother. She would prefer to see an owner in there and an owner in a third unit, and everybody on site and improving the property, and a condominium arrangement that's really, you know, working like condominiums are supposed to. And the neighbors on each side have not, they've been supportive of this project, I think primarily because it's an effort to improve property that really hasn't been changed for many years. It's a neighborhood where some of the properties could certainly use some additional investment, and so the question becomes, who's going to invest and how are they going to do it, and what's going to promote a good investment. You can do a broad brush attempt at zoning, which is what the state's doing with this accessory bylaw, but you don't know what you're going to get in that situation. Or you can try going to the Board of Appeals and crafting a particular proposal and seeing whether it's an improvement rather than a detraction from the neighborhood. And you know, so the other reason I think that I thought we should at least ask is that the accessory, the state law has been passed for accessory units. It does actually apply apparently to 2-family structures, but I won't, and it can apply to a unit that's in a yard, so a garage or something like that. Again, this is an unusual property. It's already a 2-family. I don't know exactly how that bylaw would be applied here, but it did seem to me that the situation has changed somewhat in terms of what's going to be possible. Maybe your view is, well, you just wait and see what you can do with that bylaw. I think what will have to happen here, it's very clear, and I said that at the beginning, I believe, especially given Joe Achu's evaluation of the situation, that the building has to be taken down and the property has to be sold. And whoever, because this owner cannot afford to wait months, he cannot afford to finance doing nothing at this point, and he eventually needs to find a place to live. So I think that, you know, as long as I'm just curious as to whether there's any interest at all in this concept. I know you're not the general public. You're only 3 people, but you've had a lot of service on the Board of Appeals. I'm curious because I don't find it offensive, the idea that you could, in general, I might be disturbed by the idea of just going out and building little units in backyards and creating a third, especially when you already have 2. But if you can show that there's parking, if you can observe the legally required setbacks, if you can show that each unit has a yard and it's a condominium 3-unit situation, I think it's a pretty good solution to creating somewhat lower cost housing, but ownership housing, which means it's housing that people want to invest in. I don't think it's a bad idea. So I'd certainly hope to have the opportunity at some time in the future if a new owner is interested in bringing such a proposal back to the board.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. McKettrick. Does that conclude your testimony? And we can speak to all of what you said.
Just one other thing, you mentioned MBTA zoning. I want you to understand that, well, that one of the issues during the past year and a half for this applicant, and there were plenty of problems, I recognize, we all acknowledge them, including the applicant, was the MBTA zoning bylaw. That was being constructed during this time, and this house is within a half mile of Mattapan Square. So it seemed possible that it seemed likely that there would be some zoning enacted in Milton that would allow slightly higher densities, and that it very well might have allowed a 3rd unit at this site, which is a 9,000 plus square foot lot. Now, as it turned out, of course, town meeting passed the zoning. It didn't include this end of Brush Hill Road, and I have no idea why it didn't, because it is within a half mile of Mattapan Square. And then it was, reversed by the town of Milton, and now it's on appeal. So nobody knows what's going to happen. Maybe we'll get a completely different, less intense opportunity that will have to create some zoning. But I still think that these areas within a half mile of Mattapan Square, like this one, are likely to be areas where you would allow somewhat higher density if it's possible to do it with proper design and site plan review and that kind of thing. So that's the other part of what's been going on, at least in my mind. The state's accessory zoning bylaw passed only in July, and it doesn't come into effect for 6 months. We don't know how that's going to be applied. And then the MBTA zoning, which hasn't been resolved. So, I guess I just hope that you would, as a board, if you can't do anything now in terms of granting any of these requests, I'm just trying to think about this. I'd be concerned about not being able to come back to the board for 2 years on the 3 units. So
Yeah.
I'd like the board to comment on that, and perhaps
We will.
that should be withdrawn.
Which is why I suggested we do this. We'll get to that. That's a fair point. Let me ask Ms. Are you all set for now?
I'm set for now.
Ms. O'Donnell?
I just wanted to say, to address the issue of the accessory dwelling units and the MBTA zoning, as somebody who left the zoning board to become a member of the planning board, and then had to come back to the zoning board because I got tossed off the planning board for trying to amend our accessory dwelling unit bylaw. I'm a person who is sensitive to the fact that this would probably be an excellent location for one. And I would look forward to what happens with the state when the bylaw becomes effective in February. What I was trying to say, and maybe not so very well, is that, I'd be inclined to be drafting, to approving a request if it was better, better circumstances, if somebody was coming in clean now, and not as somebody who had decided to do their own conversion without any kinds of permits. So that if somebody was coming back as a new owner of this property with a new plan, potentially in that same location, it'd be I can't speak without knowing the facts, but I would be inclined to say, yeah, that might probably work. But in a situation like this, I'm sorry that I wouldn't be able to be supportive.
Thank you. Mr. Gray, anything you'd like to add at this point?
Just, I don't think our authority under the statute that grants us, was it 48, chapter, section 10, 58, whatever. I don't feel comfortable going on a use variance for this to add a dwelling like this. I think that's at least certainly on this record. I'm not like comfortable with that concept at this point.
Yeah, thank you. Is it sound of anything that they'd like to add based upon what Mrs. McKettrick has said? You don't have to. I don't put any pressure on you, but you're certainly invited to. Okay. I have some.
Sorry, who are you addressing?
Me?
Yeah, who are you
Oh,
asking?
the town. I said the town.
you.
I don't know if the
Thank you.
town, the
Okay.
town council or the building commission, anything they want to add. I invite them to do so at this time.
I have nothing further to add.
Thank you.
Yeah, I have nothing. Thank you, though.
Let me say this. I don't want to make any comment on whether the property is going to be sold or not. There's been testimony on that. That board has nothing to do with that. Second thing is, I feel like there's a little bit of asking for forgiveness instead of requesting permission at this hearing that hasn't been spoken to, but really, I want to put that on the table. To the extent the hardship's been created, it really doesn't have anything to do with the property, in my opinion. It's got to do with the actions of the party, the applicant. And that may or may not be unfortunate. I don't know, but a lot of that issue, I think, has been removed by the commissioner's testimony that the building has to be removed. Hard stop. I think that's important. The third point is, I don't think the standard for a variance has been met for a use variance. I don't see the uniqueness at all. And I'm very reluctant to support opening that door without the kinds of standards that you would see in legislation adopted by town meeting. If the town meeting votes to modify the zoning ordinance to do the kinds of things that has been suggested at this meeting, where there's appropriate parking, appropriate space in the pursuit of more units, that's fine. But the board, I don't think it's up to the board, in the absence of establishing a clear compliance with the statutory guidelines that we've been provided with, could do that. So I would be reluctant, if this were to come back, to support the kinds of things that we're talking about, lest the board be prepared to spend a lot of time granting these kinds of variances. Because I don't think there's a whole, I mean, the lot may be nice, it may be unique in the environment that it's situated, or perhaps in the immediate, but I don't think it's unique in the town. And I think a lot of people would have that same kind of thought. So my sense is that while I'm happy to close the evidentiary portion of the hearing and move to deliberate the merits, I'd also be willing to entertain, subject to the pleasure of the members, a dismissal of this matter without prejudice, should you wish to reapply, which is always your right as a citizen of the town. But that's really the applicant's choice, and I'd invite the applicant to consider that. And if not, I would, and failing additional testimony, I'd invite, or comments from the public, close the evidentiary portion of the hearing.
May I speak?
Yeah, please. Of
Yeah.
course.
If you would give me 3 minutes, I'm going to talk to the applicant, but I'd like to talk to him on my cell phone.
All right,
I can tell you that my advice would be to ask for dismissal or withdrawal, to ask for permission to withdraw the application without prejudice. And the reason for that is the only clear path forward that I can see here is for the applicant himself to do the demolition, or to sell the property with the burden of the demolition being on the buyer, and then future improvements to the property are up to the buyer. But it would be, and I, you don't have to do this, but it would be an additional burden on the buyer to know that there's no possibility of coming back with anything related to this application for 2 years.
Yeah.
So it would be certainly, I think, beneficial at this point. I hear you. I know you're not going to grant the relief that's been requested. And just because it looks to me like that's, the property is going to be sold either before or after demolition. And a new buyer is going to want to know, whether they can try to do anything. They're certainly going to have the advantage of this hearing and, which is recorded, and they will be able to learn about it. And I don't think anybody's going to have anything put over on them about what they can do with the property. So I can assure you about that. But could you give me just a couple of minutes? And
We're going to rely on the Leonard rule of the acting chair's prerogative. The board will be in recess for 3 minutes to permit the applicant to consult with her counsel.
thank you.
If the members object, they'll be overruled by the.
Thank you.
Fine.
Emphasis on acting.
Oh, come on.
Nick Gray, did you, were you picking up dinner when I rode by you?
Indeed. Yeah, it was a quick night. You looked very, very determined and highly skilled and safely attired.
Well, those, that light is just a magical thing,
At this time of night? Yeah, no, it's good. I miss that the commute, on the bike.
Well, hey, I remember you said that. Yeah, that was a
I
good
really
break.
do. I mean, that's
Yeah.
the only downside with starting our own firm, not in the middle of Boston.
So I don't know if you folks have been watching, but MassDOT's been building a new bike trail from Tinian Beach up to Marcy
Oh,
Boulevard.
yeah, I went on a tour with the Neponset River Watershed Association when they had a king tide in the beginning of the summer.
What was that like?
Oh, it was amazing how high that water comes.
I've
Right?
seen, I've ridden through that water.
Unbelievable. And it cuts off that.
Well, the
whole-
bridge is elevated, so the water would be
Yeah.
underneath the bridge, right? Yeah.
Right, but if you go to Tinian Beach, which I'd never been to before, it turns out these people residents were talking about the fact that if there's a really high king tide, they
Floods.
cut off from the city of Boston. You can't get off there.
Yeah,
That whole neighborhood
that's right.
is isolated.
That
And-
that Mr. Mullen's familiar with that route. That's
Oh, yeah.
that's the road.
We
Yeah.
used to come there, years and years ago, but it's very busy. There's a lot of pickleball over there, actually, which is pretty good,
yeah, with
especially when it's isolated from the rest of the city of
That's
Boston.
a better place for pickleball than some of the other activities that history has shown have occurred in that area.
That's true. That's true.
As I understand it,
Yeah, that's the only thing I'd ever heard about it.
all I
but,
know is what I read in the papers.
Yeah. They do a
Yeah,
lot of
I
staging. But-
haven't taken the bicycle out once this summer. It's
Well, you've
terrible.
been busy on your boat.
I've been busy yachting, yes.
How was that?
I spent a month on a powerboat on the Great Lakes,
Good for you.
which was amazing. And then I did a couple weeks up in Maine on a sailboat. And
So when you
then,
say the Great Lakes, did you go through the locks and go into different lakes and things?
well, we went up to Oswego, New York. There's a retired nuclear submarine captain owns this 53-foot powerboat, and he was moving it to Duluth to visit his family. So he started out in Maine, and you could sign up for sections. So I signed up to do Thousand Islands, Kingston, Ontario, the Trent Severn Waterway, which is 214 miles with 45 locks.
Yeah.
And it ends up in Georgian Bay in Lake Huron. And then I went to Mackinac Island and I got off in Lake Michigan. was
Wow, it's
amazing.
like a history of the late 19th or late 18th century of the United States.
Oh,
Plus,
man, yeah.
FDR there at Mackinac, huh?
Oh, it was amazing. And the thing is, so interesting, that whole area was sort of settled by Jesuit priests.
Oh, really?
Yeah, with the French, and, sort of setting up little camps and schools and all that sort of stuff in churches and things like that. And then, of course, turned over to the English. But it was just amazing. I've never been on a powerboat that long. I've only been on a powerboat for a day, not almost a month.
Mm.
But it was nice. Kept moving.
53 feet.
Yeah. Yeah, it's huge. And there were some parts where when we were looking at the depth sounder, it was 0.8 feet, 8 inches, on 0.8 underneath the hull. Yeah, you sneeze and you're aground.
That doesn't sound like a lot of water.
No, it wasn't. It
Were you
wasn't.
in the Erie Canal at all?
No, I wasn't. I didn't do that part.
the
I
boat
didn't think I
was.
was a good enough friend to sign up for that part. But you know, Mike, he's not gonna go that way home. He's gonna take the boat out through St. Lawrence Seaway next summer. And then go to Labrador and the west coast of Newfoundland. And then down to Maine.
Wow.
Okay.
Yeah, Nick and I went to the Cape.
We did. We rode bikes on the Cape.
Yeah, well,
Very
that's
hot.
pretty good.
Hot day. Or
Very
humid
hot.
day.
It was very hot.
Very humid.
Yeah.
But we made it.
We did.
Uh-huh.
You made it
All the way to
slightly ahead of
Bingtown.
me, I think.
You rode from here to the Cape?
I
was a
rode from
PMC.
Warren. Mr. Mullen, I think,
Wow.
did the 2-day project.
Yeah.
I went to Marion Jeffries when they had a memorial service for her.
Mm.
And town meeting member, you know, the Jeffries family that had
Sure.
property over.
Well, we're
She was a
familiar.
huge bike rider.
I know.
It was amazing hearing about what she did.
Well known.
It was incredible.
The OG bike rider in town.
So Peter, nice to see you.
Yeah,
He's
nice
in
to
the
see
office late, burning the midnight oil over in Quincy.
Yeah. But he's holding up the best traditions of the bar and wearing a tie, unlike us clowns.
I know.
I know with the Patriots about to start in about 20 minutes, so.
Oh, geez, I don't even know.
What town do you live in, Peter? Where do you have to go?
I live in Easton, so not too far.
That's not bad.
24.
The applicant, I see the applicant has rejoined.
I've returned, but
Following the
Mr.
short
Clark
recess.
would like the opportunity to address the board.
Fine.
He is on his phone, I believe, or he will be. And I think you need to do something so that he can speak.
I see him and I can promote him.
Mr. Clark, welcome to the Board of Appeals.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes,
Hey, I just want to give a background on my situation, my piece of it, please.
fine, proceed.
So this started with Joe Prondyke. I get it. I did something wrong, and I went down there and I got a good situation with Joe Prondyke. And Joe Prondyke told me to build this. Joe Prondyke did. He told me if I want to do something like this, move the structure over 8 feet because this is an accessory structure, and in the bylaws, the setback for the left side and all the setbacks is 8 feet in the residential C district. I've been in
Mr. Clark, you don't have to yell at the board, okay?
Sorry, sir. I'm not trying to
Yeah,
yell, sir. I'm
so-
sorry.
so-
I'm sorry.
so
I'm
just
sorry.
slow down. We're happy to listen to you, but
Just-
I'm not gonna let you yell at the Board of Appeals.
No, I get it. I'm not trying to yell, sir. I apologize.
You are yelling.
I apologize. Am I good now? Am I
Yes.
still yelling?
Go ahead, proceed.
So, Joe Prondyke told me to move it over 8 feet, and that would be compliant. He told me to put the deck there, and that would be. I've submitted 5 plans myself. I've brought in 3 contractors. They made a comment to me about the foundation, so I paid a contractor $9,000 to pull the building permit. Joe, now the building commissioner now told me out of his own mouth, I don't care what you do, I'm taking that building down. He's followed me multiple times. He's called DCF on me. He's called the detectives. I've never been arrested, never been in trouble a day in my life. I got detectives coming here outside the gate, following me. I'm nervous as a leaf. I just didn't want to go to the Board of Appeals because we never seen Black people up there. I'm Black and we never seen Black people up there. So we came to a good conclusion with the previous commissioner that told us, listen, if you don't want to go to the Board of Appeals, this is what you do. And so what he did was he told Barry T. Ringler, the inspector, sir, this is bad, man. It's really a bad spot. So he told Barry T. Ringler, hey, I'm going to need him. This is all set. You can issue the building permit. Barry T. Ringler with his personal animus and all that stuff and just decided he's not going to give us anything and give the new guy a bad rap about us. The first time I went up there and I met Joe Achu, I like Joe Achu. I don't care. I still, to this day, every day, I told him, I say it all the time. I went up there and I shook his hand. I go, oh, this is the new commissioner. The guy's real humble. This guy, I couldn't even tell. He walked right by me. I couldn't tell. Just a humble guy. And so everything's good. The relationship got bad when the new commissioner came in, because he didn't have any knowledge on what was happening before, that I did come to a good solution with Joe Prondak. Me and Joe Prondak came to a good solution with Marion to say, okay, because Marion's been in here since the beginning. Joe Prondak told me you can weatherize, you can do small stuff to the building until we get things figured out. Joe, he left, and when he left, the new guy came in, which is Joe Achu, and Joe Achu sent me a letter to the house saying, make the structure safe or take it down. And so since then, I've made the structure safe. I haven't gotten an inspection since then, but I've done all the work to make it safe. I'm in local 721. I work concrete work. I work for L&L Concrete. My foundation is a shallow frost protected foundation. It's 3 feet. It's 3 feet. It's 12 inches wide and 16 inches at the footer. That is a shallow frost protected foundation with insulation around it. He tells me he doesn't like it. He wants it to be 4 feet. Okay, Joe, I'll get the guy. I paid the guy $9,000. I'm sorry, I don't want to yell. I'm sorry. I'm not trying to, I just want to make sure I'm calm. But I paid the guy $9,000. To this day, we don't have the money. We're paying $600 on top of our mortgage, even with a tenant. We don't have anything. We're not just living with a tenant and just I expressed to them, we were in the basement and we had a carbon issue. We were going to die in the basement. I had no choice but to build this place. We would have dead. We'd have been dead in the basement with a kid. We had a problem. We had a leak in the basement. I came here. I went to the hospital because I got sick. I was in the hospital for about 7 days, 8 days or something like that. And after that, I couldn't go to work for a while, so I couldn't afford the money. And so the only thing I could do was come to the garage. And that's the situation. Like Marion been in with us since the beginning, where Marion's told me everything that, I do the right thing. In my opinion, I applied for 5 building permits. I brought 2 contractors, and one contractor told me that he got his building permit deleted without a denial letter because the commissioner told him he's not getting no building permit, nothing. He's not going to get nothing. So that one got deleted. The other guy I paid $9,000 to, he can't get a building permit because I don't know. I paid him $9,000. I don't know. Like, I just don't know.
Mr. Clark, appreciate your testimony. Is there anything else you'd like to discuss with the board?
I was told I can do this exact design by Joe Achu. He told me keep the building, Joe Prondak, I'm sorry. He told me keep the building 20 feet in height. He told me keep it 8 feet off the left side. He told me keep it 30 feet off the back. But before, the building was over 30. The setback was worse. It was not 29 feet. It was like 30 some feet. So I brought the building all the way in to meet the setback. And for an accessory structure, 8 feet in a residential C district, 8 feet off the left side meets the setback for an accessory structure. And even in the rear, 29 feet is way more than what's needed for an accessory structure because I studied the bylaw. Like, I'm homeless, basically, if you guys kick me out of here. Like, this is what you guys are doing to me, pretty
the
much.
board's not kicking anybody out, okay? Let me say this.
No, I understand that.
Most of what you said is really not in front of the board. It sounded like we're not going to relitigate what the Superior Court dealt with and was reached in a judgment with the court.
We never had any conversation with the Superior Court. I was supposed to have a preliminary injunction and present my evidence. And then we came to Richard, we went to the select board and Richard said, hey, calm down. Everything's okay. What if I got you an application in front of the board tomorrow and we work this out? Would it be okay? And Richard said he worked an agreement out with Peter Mello, who I respect and everything as well. And that's just as far as.
We're not going to have a conversation. This is a hearing. Mr. Clark, we've heard you, we've heard your counsel, we've heard testimony from the town, and the board has deliberated the matters in front of us. There must have been conversations with the Norfolk County Superior Court because the board's been presented with an agreement for judgment principally on the issues about which you speak. And the court has ordered that the building come into compliance. Those matters are, let me just finish. Let me just finish, Mr. Clark.
Yes, sir.
Those matters are properly in front of the building commissioner. The matter in front of the Board of Appeals is that you have asked for to be permitted to use the garage and the new structure as a residence. The board is not inclined to permit that. It is not an accessory structure. It's not a garage. It's not associated with the other unit. You're asking to convert a 2-family property to a 3-family property. That is a significant matter in the town of Milton We've just spent an hour talking about it. We've made our views known. That's the matter in front of us. I'm sympathetic to a lot of the issues that you raised, but it feels to me like that's not in front of the board tonight.
Yes, sir. Can I just add,
Yes.
thank
We-
you for
proceed.
I'm just so it's okay. I have nothing further at this time. I can't even form my words to speak because it's just been such a bad situation for the last year where I've done everything, not even to say I have to ask for it to be a separate unit or anything like that. Even if it was allowed where I can have it be an accessory structure or an accessory dwelling to my condo, I'm up for anything. It's just that we're in a housing crisis right now is our situation. We were living in a basement in Fall River with a baby and we couldn't do it anymore. And so we have the place here. And so this is kind of the best situation. So maybe it's a situation we have to redo our application. But also I want to say is we haven't gotten the chance to get the structure inspected at all. So before the structure is just torn down or anything, we should at least get it inspected. I've never been to court, so I know nothing about the process. I know I went to court one time, so I come home and I'm looking on TikTok or YouTube to find out, oh, do you go back to court another times? And pretty much what I found is that you do go back to court another time, so you're supposed to present your evidence. We sat there and then the two attorneys talked one time, and then after that, it was just, oh, your house is coming down. I'm like, but no one came to verify, oh, the left side is off 8 feet, which is okay for an accessory structure. The rear is way over what's necessary for an accessory structure. I feel like maybe me and Marion, we do have to go back and redo the application for maybe not a separate residential unit, which is something you're saying you're not inclined to go with, but
Yeah, you can
we're in
do
a
all
spot
that.
where even an accessory structure would help us a lot. We have a double lot here. It's a non-conforming double lot. It just doesn't have the frontage.
You can do all of that. You can do all of that, but that's not in front of the board tonight. We're not considering that because that's not what we've been asked to do.
I understand. I
Been
understand.
asked to do, we've given a sense of the board, we've given the applicant the benefit of a conversation so as to maximize your opportunity to reconsider the application. I think the board's been more than fair with you.
Yes, sir.
And
Yes,
while
sir.
we're
I appreciate
sympathetic to the
every single one of you. I
situation
thank
and
you
the-
guys. I'm
Let me
sorry.
just finish, Mr. Clark. Let me just
Yes, sir.
finish. And while we're sympathetic to the situation, we're not going to take testimony on an application that's not before us. Simple
Yes,
as
sir.
that. Okay.
Understood. Jeff, I just
Let
want
me
to say
ask
thank
the-
you. And I'm
You're
sorry
welcome.
that this has to be a situation that is at hand. I really am genuinely sorry about it. It was never my intentions to create an issue for everybody. We were just in a bad spot, and I really, really, really wanted to just
Yeah.
live in a nice, comfortable place and just be out of where we were at. And just the drive in that, it put me in a lot of hot water. But I'm sorry. I just want to say I really am sorry to the lady, to Jeff, and to Nick. I am sorry.
But that's all right. We appreciate that people all want what you want. But there are rules and processes that must be followed, and you've got
Yes, sir.
competent counsel, and you can speak with her at your convenience. And we wish you luck. Let me ask Mrs. McKetrick if there's anything further in the board, and if
I
you've
would
got a
like the
request
board
of
to
the board at
consider
this time.
allowing the applicant to withdraw without prejudice.
Okay. Is there any other testimony? Anybody want to be heard on that?
I'd like to just add one other thing, just sort of to point out, you know, the original discussions, I just want to give you a little bit of insight into all of this. The original discussions with Joe Prondak were to change the application, to change the plans to an accessory structure, not an accessory living unit, an accessory structure. That's not easy to do with Joe Prondak or any other building commissioner. You've got to lay out all the rooms, but you can't have a kitchen. You know, you don't have kitchen and bedrooms. It's not an apartment. So you have to convince the building commissioner that it's not an apartment. And that was tough to do in this case. That was the plan, to build the accessory structure, have it constructed. And then if, you know, MBTA zoning came along and allowed a higher density, then there could be a possibility in the future of coming back and asking to convert it to a living unit. That was the thinking. And that was what Joe Prondak advised. And that's what the applicant was working on when Joe left. But you know, he started out saying he wanted to do a living unit. And I don't think anybody could forget that. So it never got any of those later plans approved, and it created a very frustrating and bad situation.
Yeah.
So I think.
Nobody ever
though-
intends for bad outcomes. There was a bad
Yeah.
outcome in this case. I understand it. We'll take
Yes.
notice of the fact that it wasn't intended.
Yes, one other thing, the order from the court, I didn't represent the applicant before the court, his attorney did a good job, I'm sure, but it allows for a number of things. It's a short time frame now, so I don't know how much more can be done, but certainly in theory, it allows for a full inspection. It allows for the applicant to simply apply to finish the accessory structure if all of the building code violations that Joe H. was talking about can be cured. That would be a possibility. I understand Joe said to you tonight, the building has to come down, but
There's
the
no-
order actually
Gotcha.
does allow for for something else. I don't know that it's going to be possible.
Yeah,
But
I don't,
I
I
will
don't see
say
that
that
as, I'm sorry, Marion, I don't see that as a matter for the Board of Appeals either. That's a
it is
matter
not. It
for
is
the
not, but
parties, the parties to the agreement for judgment. So
I
I refer to
understand.
the building commissioner and town council on those matters.
right, absolutely. Okay,
Um,
that's all I have.
Question for the members, would they entertain the applicant's request to withdraw the application without prejudice?
Yes, I would.
Okay, Mr. Gray?
Yes. Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
Okay, I agree as well. I don't think we need to close the evidence. I don't think we need to take any further testimony. I think Mrs. McKettrick and Mr. Clark, you can consider this matter to have been withdrawn. To the extent there needs to be a writing, we will work with Bill to get an appropriate writing for the file. This matter has been withdrawn in front of the Board of Appeals without prejudice to the applicant. I want to thank the applicant, Mr. Clark, Mrs. McKettrick, certainly the commissioner and town council for appearing in this unusual matter, and of course, my fellow members of the board for their time tonight.
Thank you, Acting Chair. And I'm sorry, if I could just
Please.
suggest, subject to the board's preference, it might just, as belt and suspenders, make sense to take a formal vote, just so, just for the record. But I also want to say, and I don't want to belabor this, obviously, it's not necessary, given the course of the discussion and the scope of the board's review, but respectfully, Mr. Clark made a number of allegations that in which he attributed comments to different town officials and the like that we would categorically refute. I just would be remiss if I didn't at least say that, but I don't want, nothing that we need to belabor, but I just wanted to underscore that.
So noted to town council. Let me ask for a
Thank you.
formal vote of the members. Mr. Gray,
Yes.
Ms. O'Donnell,
Yes.
and the acting chair votes in favor of the withdrawal without prejudice for the record, and that will be duly noted in the board's files. Unless there's further matters in front of the Board of Appeals, I'd like to call this hearing ended and the matter concluded for tonight. And appreciate everybody's time. Thank you very much.
Thank
Have a
you.
good evening.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank
Good
you.
night now. Bye now.